Cashflow Diary podcast, episode 539.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because you and I, we're out there building our business, doing our best, becoming bigger, better, badder versions of ourselves, and yet there's something that we must employ to make that happen. In fact, there are some of you who are listening right now. You've asked for more of it. Some of you have watched other people who have loads of it, and yet there are still some of us who believe we don't have enough of it and wonder how can we obtain more. At this moment, you're probably going, what is Jay talking about? Well, today I'm talking about courage, period, point blank and simple. And in fact, I have a person with me today who's built a company around helping others build courage. They've been doing it for 17 years. And I just think that's amazing because one of the biggest skill sets, one of the biggest ingredients that makes entrepreneurs what we are is courage. I'm, of course, talking about Bill Treasurer. You may know him from his company, Giant Leap Consulting, or any of the 5 books that he's written. In fact, one of his books is having its 10th anniversary, and that's what we're excited about today because it's Courage Goes to Work, how to build a back of bones, boost performance, and get results. So here's what's going to happen for you guys today. I think that no matter where you are right now, by the time we're done, you probably will feel a little more courageous. And when you're ready to continue that conversation, you're going to know exactly what to do. So let's get ready to listen, love, and learn from Bill Treasurer. Bill, how you doing?
Jay, wow, what a fantastic intro. I'm really looking forward. I want to hear this Bill Treasurer guy now after that.
Totally understood. Well, you do something that I find completely interesting, and I can't wait to dig in. Now, before we go there, though, I have to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody the first time that they're here. You ready?
Okay, I'm on the hot seat.
I got it. So I look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. You know, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, the Hulk, etc. You get the idea. Because I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. For example, as an entrepreneur, occasionally I can envision myself flying around town, using our products and services and saving customers one sale at a time. And at that moment, I'm probably, yes, wearing a cape. Also, though, like a superhero, there's a moment where an entrepreneur has a beginning. For example, if you think about Spider-Man, there was a time where he was just a kid going to school, doing his thing, taking some photos. And then one day he gets bit by a spider, discovers, hey, I've got a superhuman ability, and he has to choose whether to use this for good or for evil. So my question to you is as follows. Before your books, all 5 of them, before working with companies like, NASA, Saks Fifth Avenue, UBS, Walsh Construction, etc., before becoming a chief encouragement officer over there at Giant Leap Consulting, before everything that people know you for today, what we want to know is, who is Bill Treasurer?
Man, that's a good question. So Bill Treasurer, geez, I'm talking about myself in the third person. I grew up 18 miles from Manhattan. So I grew up in the suburbs of New York, and sometimes, New Yorkers can carry a little swagger. I think it gives them a little bit of maybe overconfidence sometimes, but you're sort of born with a natural confidence, having to make your way in a world that's crowded with other people trying to make their way. So I grew up in the suburbs of New York with a brother and two sisters, an older sister, younger brother, younger sister, and got lost in the family, right? We had four kids. So I and my sister got a lot of attention. And so I became kind of the achiever to try to get my parents' attention, I think, and found the sport of springboard diving. And it became my little sport, like some people go into soccer or baseball or football or volleyball. And for me, springboard diving became an outlet and an escape and a venue where I could achieve. And the harder I worked, I saw my own results. If I put in the effort, I would get better and I would learn more difficult dives. Got ready to go. I won the Westchester County Diving Championships 3 times. Got ready to go to college, and they started to dangle scholarships in front of me. And now, and they'd say, "Bill, you're a great low board diver. You're quite the 1 meter specialist. Tell us about your high board list of dives." And I had never bothered to learn a high board list of dives, which they have in college. If you're going to get a college scholarship, you're going to need a high board list of dives. But I didn't have a high board list of dives. 1, because I didn't have a high board. And 2, because I was and am petrified of heights.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm hearing this correctly. You are standing over the edge of a pool. Looking down from above, and you're going to voluntarily fling yourself off the edge of a board into water, and you're afraid of heights.
I'm afraid of heights. And so now it became and it's kind of a metaphor. So many people are afraid of heights. Norman Rockwell actually has a wonderful painting of a little skinny kid inching out over the edge of the high board, looking down below, and you see the kid's petrified face. It's almost an archetype. It's certainly a motif. And so here I was faced with this fearful moment. What am I going to do? Am I going to walk away from another sport? It's like the only thing I've got. Am I going to walk away from diving? And fortunately, I had a coach who wouldn't let me walk away from my own potential. And he nudged me into discomfort. He would take me down to Iona College in New Rochelle, New York, and I've never seen to this day another diving board anywhere in the country that was built on a hydraulic lift like the diving board was at Iona College. So he could take the diving board now and go from 1 meter, which I was used to, but now he lifts it up to 1.5 meters. Now I'm going over on my dives. I don't want to go to practice. I'm getting welts on my legs. I'm doing screaming belly whoppers. And but after a while, maybe 100, 200 dives, I get used to it, and I start getting a little bored. And boredom's a great clue. Jay, what do you think he did when I got bored at 1.5 meters?
Oh, I thought he was going to be raising it sneakily while you were on it, but yeah, I'm assuming he increased the height.
Exactly. So through this process of modulating between comfort and discomfort. Human beings don't grow in a zone of comfort. You grow, progress, and evolve in a zone of discomfort. This is key to being an entrepreneur as well. And how much discomfort are you willing to withstand? So through that process, eventually, I got a 3 meter list of dives, and I got a full scholarship to West Virginia University. And it was like the first experience that I had really spending a lot of time with fear, and that if you allow yourself to walk through it instead of run away from it, that there can be rewards for you. And the long arc of the story, which but your listeners don't, is that ultimately through that same process of modulating between comfort and discomfort and incrementally withstanding greater intensity of fear, I became a world-class high diver and a captain of the U.S. high diving team, diving from heights that scaled to over 100 feet into a small pool that was 10 feet deep, traveling at speeds in excess of 50 miles an hour, protected only by a Speedo.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I've watched that, like when the Olympics come around, I'm an Olympic nut. I will watch diving, and I'm looking at that, and all I can say to myself every time is, no way. No way. I mean, you're talking to a guy who doesn't even know how to swim, let alone voluntarily go into the pool from such heights. And I have to ask this question. What motivated you? Because, see, oftentimes when we're faced with things like this, you had a choice. You didn't have to, but what made you actually want to? Because there's usually this point where when we're facing something like that, and we've, as that board goes up, it becomes something, maybe we even enjoy it a little bit. What was that for you?
Right. So, and bear in mind that, in the Olympic Games, they stop at 33 feet, which is 10 meters.
Yeah.
And we were going from like 3 times higher than that.
Which is also crazy.
Which is also crazy.
Both of them. Either one. I'm good either way.
Yeah. I guess that I would say there's a few things. On the one hand, that I knew that what was holding me back was fear. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like that idea, that it was my own psychology holding me back from the potential achievement of something. That's sort of the main answer. And I knew that if I wanted to be part of the high diving team, that I would have to do this high dive, which I did not want to do. And that was sort of, if I wanted to be able to travel around the world, meet really fascinating people, be part of a troupe of athletes, have a life experience that very, very few people will get to have, then the sacrifice for that would be able to extend what I had already done. I had already done it to get to 3 meters. Now, if I could go through that same process again, where the stakes were higher, but I could do some things to promote my own safety, maybe, just maybe, I could be a member of the high dive team. Now, you mix in peer pressure and testosterone, and that helps the equation too, because you had a bunch of crazy ass, other divers, doing the same thing, and that helped me up the ladder.
Totally understood. Now, let me ask this question. I'm just curious. Were there any time, at any moment where you're at the edge going, what am I doing?
Yes. I did it for 7 years. Now, I had seen divers. I saw one diver break both ankles on the bottom of the pool.
Ow.
I had seen guys blow out their knees. I saw a guy have his bathing suit, tear off of his body when he hit the pool from such force in front of 2,000 people.
Oh, man.
So I had seen a lot, and I had an Olympic diving coach tell me, Bill, do it for like 3 years. It'll be fine on your resume later in life. But that's about the limit. And I had done it for 7, right? Like I was now just being Peter Pan and avoiding growing up and prolonging my adolescence. And I also knew that I was on borrowed time, that if I kept doing it, I was going to get hurt too. The most dangerous time on the high dive ladder was when you felt complacent, because you might have done 6 dives someday, and now it's the 7th dive, and you're just tired, and you're not thinking about. You need to be a little bit afraid of some sort of danger that you're facing. That fear gives you respect, and when you respected the ladder, when you were afraid and you knew that ladder could kick your butt, it could kill you if it wanted to, then you were going to take that dive seriously and do a good job. It was like when you were in the middle of the season and you had done a whole bunch of dives, that now you're getting dangerous, not because really you're getting dangerous out of complacency, and you're no longer respecting the dive. And after 7 years, that was my fear, and I decided to retire my Speedo.
Got it. So take us on this journey. How do we go from throwing yourself off 100-foot platform into, well, probably throwing yourself off a 1,000-foot platform, being in business? You gotta feel the same.
Yeah. They put me in charge of the troop of athletes at a young age. I was about 23, 24 years old, and they made me the captain of the team. And I did a bad job of leading. I didn't know who I was as a leader, so I adopted the style of my predecessors, and ultimately I adopted the style of my dad, who was like a hothead, authoritarian, kind of guy. And so that's the leader I became, like this little Napoleon with a little bit of power and misusing it. And one of the divers who was older than me confronted me one day after the show. He's like, Treasurer, I don't need this show and this dive so much that I'm going to be treated like the way you treat us. I'll walk. And I got defensive, but I thought about it and I knew he was right. I had no idea who I was as a leader. So I started to read books on leadership and group dynamics and organizational development. And I got better and I got a lot interested in the topic of leadership. So I put myself through graduate school. And eventually I got a job in a small boutique consulting company that specialized in leadership. Then I worked with a team building company and did 300 team building events. And then I worked for Accenture, one of the world's largest management consulting companies. So along the way, I was getting a lot of accumulated experience of working with leaders. And then after working at Accenture, and I was their first full-time internal executive coach, and my job was to coach people to clarity to help them get what they want out of their leadership. And as I did that, I realized that I didn't want to stay at Accenture. I've got great respect for the company, but the expression that I really wanted to bring forward in the world was to help people take their own high dives. I wanted to help organizations take high dives in the way that I had done, to confront their fear, to find their courage, to put their courage to work. And so I had to take my giant leap. That became my moment. And 9/11 sort of tipped me over. I was like, you know what? Life is too short. And I want to take a big bite out of this apple before I kick. And so I had another decision point. It became sort of the next high dive in my life. Am I going to start my own company and take the entrepreneurial path when I know if I stay at Accenture, if I stay long enough, I'll probably end up being a partner and it's very well compensated, but I'll feel like I'm selling portions of my soul each day. So I decided in 2002 to take the giant leap to start Giant Leap Consulting as a courage building company to help people, organizations, leaders, entrepreneurs be more courageous.
Now, okay, that's exactly what I wanted to hit on. There are a number of people right now, Bill, who are listening to you and I, who are right at that exact moment. So I kind of have a two-part question, if you will. One, where did you, because again, you said it yourself, you're working at Accenture. There's probably even some people at Accenture right now listening to you and I, or hoping to one day even get there. And you're saying, no, that wasn't enough for me because of who I was, what I wanted to be, etc. And there's a lot of people who get to that point and figure out, you know what I'm currently doing isn't enough. But not enough people, in my opinion, get to take that next step to actually go take that giant leap, as we were saying. But you did. So I have to ask you so that they can know, where did that courage to do such a thing come from? Hello there, entrepreneur. This is Jay Massey, and what I want to say to you is that the number one mistake that I have ever made in business, number one, has been waiting too long to do the books, waiting too long to get the bookkeepers, the accountants, the CPAs, the CFOs involved, and I don't want you to make that same mistake. That mistake cost me over 6 figures, and now for a significant discount, you have the ability to get your books together using FreshBooks. So what I want you to do is I want you to go over to gofreshbooks.com/cashflow diary. Again, that's gofreshbooks.com/cashflow diary. FreshBooks is the easy to use software designed to help you, the small business owner, the freelancer, get organized and save time on invoicing, getting paid faster, keeping those books in order so that it becomes a bonus for you to do your taxes as opposed to a burden. Go over to gofreshbooks.com/cashflow diary and get started today. And now let's get back to the rest of the story.
I'm big on the idea of values congruency, which means, first of all, you got to know what your values are, right? Like
that helps. That does help.
Right? Because everybody's like, oh, I've got good values or I've got good principles. And then you ask them what they are and they're like, family and honesty. you know, so I think
That's
you got
great.
to know what your values are, and I
Yes.
did know that I really enjoyed creativity and I
Mhm.
enjoyed independence.
Mhm.
Among two of the the values that I hold are being applying creativity and in bringing my creative expression, typically through the written voice and
Mhm.
writing things.
Mhm. Mhm.
I value independence. I don't like my creativity messed with by others too much. I'll take help, but I also trust my own inner voice. And I was all about courage, right? And yet here I was at Accenture. I felt that, hey, it's great company. I'm really glad I was there. So if there are listeners, just know I have great respect for Accenture. It took me like an arrow and pulled me back and shot me forth in a great way in my career and in life. But I also knew that my values were not the values that were going to be strengthened and enhanced if I stayed at Accenture. The idea of independence, creativity, and courage are not necessarily those that are important to the individual working at Accenture. So it became a question of values congruency. And I knew if I stayed there, I would slowly over time feel like, even though it's a giant company, it would start to feel very confining and small for my soul. And so it became a soul question. I think that what happens sometimes, Jay, for
Mm.
the entrepreneur is you can't not do it. You get to the leap, and the leap makes you do it because you realize, if I don't do it, my life is going to be sublimated forever. There's now, to your point, there's probably a whole boatload of bar stools throughout the country with people sitting on it
Right.
saying, I could have been a contender, but they
Right.
never were a contender, right? Sort of regretting the risks that they didn't take, right? The risks that we regret the most in life are typically the ones we passed by and we didn't take. And I just, after 9/11 and seeing how fragile the world is and how quickly things can evaporate in terms of stability, I just wasn't prepared to live a life of dangerous safety. I needed to
Ooh.
be able to express myself in the world, and bring, and not, I go back to, you've heard the quote, we've all heard the quote from Henry David Thoreau that, most men live lives of quiet desperation. We've all heard that quote. But the second part is even more interesting to me. He says, most men live lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them.
Yeah.
And I just refused to go to the grave with the song in me. I got to sing my song.
Yeah.
Right?
I can relate to that. Oh, so well. Because there is that something that just refuses. You don't sleep. My wife would say, she's like, I got tired of you complaining. I'm just glad, even if you failed, at least you wouldn't be complaining anymore about having to go to work somewhere else. And
Yeah.
I thought that was funny when she told me that. Now,
Well, there's two things with that. One, it's always helpful, super helpful, to have a supportive spouse or partner, right? Like,
yes.
if my wife had been against my giant leap, that would have been a tough equation. And then the second thing is, and you've basically said it. One of the things when I'm helping people learn how to become more courageous is a sort of a thought experiment is what we call the theory of least regrets. The
Mm.
theory of
Hmm.
least regrets. What will I regret the least?
Right.
Taking this risk and maybe wiping out, or not taking the risks and never knowing whether or not I could have been successful and having to live with not knowing for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and that someone said it to me that same concept as that their version of hell was to meet the person they could have been. And I'm
Oh man, that's a
and
great way to put it.
and I'm like, I'm down for trying now. Let's just go figure this thing out. So now, okay, help me here, because I'm just going to go with, you probably already know that what your company does is unique. I mean, I've never had a conversation where someone says, hey, I need more courage. Let me go find a company to help me build courage.
Right.
But yet this is literally what you said. No. This is what we're going to do. You could have chosen anything in any way, shape, or form. Or why this?
Well, I have to tell you, when I first started the business, you've heard of the term risk management, and that's really big in a lot of consulting circles. And I thought, well, I want a risk leadership company. So I'm not going to do risk management. I'm going to have risk leadership, meaning once you've done all the mitigating, at some point you still got to take a risk. And so I want to be about that, the risk leadership. And I found that when I started to do my BD, right, and do my business development and meet with executives and such, anytime I would mention that 4-letter word risk, they'd sort of put their finger up like the cross, meeting a vampire. And so I'm like, okay, this isn't actually working. So what do I need to do? And working with a good friend of mine who happened to be a branding expert, his name is Mark Levy, great guy, written a number of books. And Mark, interviewed a bunch of my clients and interviewed colleagues and such. And he said, Bill, after doing this research, I know you want your business to be a risk leadership company, but that's not really what it's about. What it's about, the compelling idea is courage and courage building and helping people be more courageous. It's just framing risk in a different way. And that made all the difference. That shift was extremely helpful to my business. And I figured that, there's so many things I can't do, Jay. I'm not built for engineering. I don't have a great mathematical mind. I'm not a tradesman. I'm terrible. My wife can do better carpentry than I can do. And yet the one thing that I've got is my little chord here that I can play relative to courage. And I'm a good trainer. I'm a good corporate trainer. And that I knew that I could work with groups and work with people to help them do the courageous things that they need to do to take their careers or businesses to the next level.
Got it. That makes sense. I mean, I do also consider it a gift that when you, like you're saying, you can find, this is where I belong. This is the song I can sing. This is the game that I can play. And knowing that, I think, is in and of itself is a strength. So let's dive a little bit into the 10th anniversary edition. You first of all, congratulations. That's just insane and awesome and all of those things at the same time. But one of the things that I like specifically just about the title is when you say courage goes to work. That implies to me, and hopefully to others, that it's not just an emotional feeling, it's not just a thought, but there's actual observable actions that should be deployed when you are feeling or in this courageous moment. Could you share with us a little bit about what you intended specifically with the title?
Yeah, so thanks for mentioning that, right? The courage goes to work. In other words, courage rolls up its damn sleeves.
Right.
You act to make the courage happen. You've got to do something. It's not just going to come to you. And it often involves some sort of a confrontation. It definitely involves moving into discomfort. I have to tell you, I've got a daughter. She's 15. She's fantastic. I've got 2 sons, too. I've got a 15-year-old son, so they're twins, and I've got a 12-year-old. But my daughter, Bina, she has cerebral palsy, and she's also deaf. So she's, got some challenges. Now she's got a cochlear implant. She can hear. Life is good. She can walk. It took her until she was 5 to learn how to walk. Mm-hmm. And she's in the same grade as her twin brother. Life is good. And she tends to be the bravest one in the family. When we go to, Carowinds or Six Flags.
Carowinds. Yes.
As a North Carolinian.
I do.
And they've got great roller coasters. There's one called the Intimidator, named after Dale Earnhardt. And Bina, my daughter, she's way more interested in going on those roller coasters sometimes than my boys. So she's full of bravery. And when I asked her one time, why do you love roller coasters so much? She said, and she talks differently as a kid with CP. She said, I like to get brave.
Well, that makes sense.
I like to get brave, not to be brave, but you have to go out and get your bravery. You have to go out and get your courage. It's not something you are. You've got to go and get it. And so the idea of courage goes to work is that you want to be courageous, roll up your damn sleeves and work for it, because you're going to have to encounter your fear. You're going to have to encounter naysayers. You're going to have to deal with your own psychology. You're going to have to deal with people who don't want you to do something. You gotta get it. You gotta go out and get your courage. You gotta roll up your sleeves. Courage goes to work.
What I like about this is I've heard it said before: if there was no Goliath, there is no David. And What you're really saying you're flipping it on its head, saying go towards the thing that you've been getting ready to prepare for, so that you hopefully never experience. You're saying no, go straight into the face of that, so that you can at least find out. Which then leads me to the question of, well, oftentimes, at least in my experience, when I do that, I sometimes I don't achieve the result I intended, and I find myself rethinking my approach to many different things. So what's the thought process around failure or failure events, or just not achieving the result that you originally intended?
Yeah, there's a lot there. You did key onto something that so courage absolutely has a relationship with fear. There's a good argument to be made that if you're not afraid of the thing, you're not really applying your courage, right? Like you need the presence of fear to experience courage. And the shortest definition for being courageous is to act despite being afraid. John McCain said that in his book called Why Courage Matters, which was an international bestseller. So what's interesting about that, Jay, is that courage is not fearlessness. So you see these bumper stickers, no fear, no fear.
Right.
It's like no brains. Courage is fearful. Let me say that again. Courage is fearful, but courage acts despite the fact that it is afraid. Now, to your point around the idea of failure, and this is certainly something that pretty much all entrepreneurs are going to find out at some point. And it becomes, you're not really anybody out in Silicon Valley until you've had a big failure, a big noticeable and visible failure. So failure has a way of shaping us. Now, that doesn't mean, like, I'm not full throttle, say yes to every risk in front of you. That's not necessarily courage. In fact, sometimes courage is a very disciplined, boundary setting no. Sometimes courage is in a no, not in a yes. But we keep failure in perspective. So back to Courage Goes to Work. The original edition of the book, the foreword of the book, was written by Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, a women's shapewear company. She was the youngest self-made female billionaire on the cover of Forbes magazine just maybe a handful of years ago. And she wrote the foreword to Courage Goes to Work because I had worked with her on 4 occasions. And in that book, she said that when she was a kid, her dad used to sit her and her brother down at the dinner table at the end of every week. She was about 11 years old. And he would ask them the same question. He'd say, okay, kids, what have you failed at this week? What have you failed at this week? And she said she learned an important lesson at a young age that if you're not failing, you're never really going to extend yourself and have a thriving career or life. And she carries that spirit now into Spanx. And so what she says is when somebody makes a mistake at Spanx, especially when they are forward falling and key us onto a new insight, I'm never disappointed. In fact, I go up to them and give them a big high five. Not because she wants them failing all the time, but because that's where innovation happens. That's where experimentation happens. Creativity needs some degree of mistake making. It's messy. And so failure has to be put in perspective. Now, I want a person to take a thoughtful, calculated risk, but I have to have some toleration for mess ups along the way.
I'm thinking. There's a number of thoughts going through my head. One, I need to ask my kids that question. Two, but also at the same time, I'm going, what is that difference? Because I've heard it said before, and I know other people have heard it said before. Like, what is the difference between like bravery and stupidity? And I'm like, or courage and stupidity in this particular case is really what it's coming. It's trying to figure out where that line is. Do you have some sort of clear demarcation that could assist us?
Well, It does have to sort of be found for each person, and sometimes it's a trial and error process. You find what your own, demarcation line is. I will tell you this: if one of your listeners, for example, is at that cusp of taking a big risk, maybe they have an appetite to be an entrepreneur, but they just haven't gotten off their high dive platform. What I would say is you need more than a pro and con list. Too many times.
You're saying that's not motivating enough, that just won't do it?
It's not enough calculation, right? Like, it's not thoughtful enough. So in my book, Right Risk, my first book on risk taking, I put forth 5 Ps, and I'll go through them real quick. But if you can answer sort of affirmatively to each one of these 5 Ps, I can't guarantee that you'll have a successful outcome, but I can guarantee you will increase the probability of a successful outcome. Way more so than if you just used a pro and con list. Now, the first P is passion. When you're thinking about this giant leap that you're facing, does it make you excited, or does it deplete your energy and exhaust you to think about it? So are you passionate about it? When you think about this leap that you're facing, do you get keyed up? And is it a positive fantasy that takes over? Passion. The second P is principle. Is it connected to some principles that you hold dear that you say are important to you? I already told you courage, creativity, and independence were 3 of mine. But what are yours? And, that a giant leap is not just about compensation. What will this risk get me? But destination. Where will this risk take me? So is it connected to a principle that you hold dear? Third, purpose. Is it connected to where you want to go in life and this career you're trying to build and what you say you're all about? Does it further your purpose in life to take this giant leap? Fourth is prerogative. Is it an exercise of your own free will and it's your own choice to leave that platform? Is it your own yes or no decision? Or is there some foot on your back pushing you off that platform or somebody to holding you back on it? So is it an exercise of free will, your own prerogative? That's the 4th P. And then the 5th P is profit. So it's the last thing that we ask is, what will this risk get me? What might the potential reward be? How will this enhance my life and career? But we don't ask that first, because if we do, we get fixated on the wrong thing and we make the risk all about compensation. That's got to be one factor. It can't be the otherwise you're chasing a shiny ball and you could be chasing it right off the cliff. So to dimensionalize and to give it more criteria and more thoughtfulness, you run it through the 5 Ps. And now, if you take your giant leap, whatever it is, you've increased the likelihood of a successful outcome, but you can also live with a non-successful event because you've thought about it in a dimensionalized way.
Yeah, it's funny that you say those things in those, because I was, as you were talking, I'm reevaluating things that I do, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And I go through that because there are so many times where what I do and what we're doing as entrepreneurs, we would do them regardless, not necessarily regardless of the profit, but it's not like the thing. It's like, yes, we do it because, yes, we take the money because, you know what, it's earned, it's there, we provided value, but it's not the sole or even overriding reason in a lot of cases, because there's something that we're trying to bring to the world, to individuals, in a completely different way.
Totally.
Now, so which to me, though, for me, and one of the things that I do is that I like to have KPIs, metrics, to figure out, am I making a difference? And we come up with different ones. So what's really going through my head is, how do you measure the change of courage? I mean, I've never seen a courage scale, so maybe you got one. I just trying to understand how that would work in your world.
So at the individual level, so I also have created a comprehensive training program. Now, my company does a lot of leadership development, even outside of the idea of courage. But I have a courageous leadership course, and it is a course that has been taught in 11 or 12 countries on 4 continents. And it's one of the things in that course called Courageous Leadership is we have a courageous leadership profile. Jay, we look at courage in 3 different dimensions, and this profile, a 30-question questionnaire, measures a person's courage capacity in each one of these, what we call the 3 buckets of courage. The first bucket of courage is what we call try courage, the courage to try something you've never done before. You find it in the courage of first attempts, when you're having to cross over some threshold that you've never done before, like the first time you bought a house, or the first time you drove a car, or the first time you asked a person on a date.
I was thinking the first time I hired someone, first time I fired
yeah.
someone, but okay, yeah, we can go with those things too. That was the first thing. Firing people took, oh my God, that was scary. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, that is totally scary. And some entrepreneurs, I didn't do it, but the first time you go into a bank to get a loan for your business, right?
Right.
Or the first time you float a payroll on a credit card.
Right. Huh. Preach it, brother. Yes, go ahead.
Those are try courage moments, and they'll really test you. And in some respects, when you're in try courage, it's the courage of action, and it's the courage of facing the unknown. It's with an unknown outcome. The second bucket of courage is not try courage; it's what we call trust courage. It's the courage of vulnerability, and the courage of being sort of emotionally exposed. It's the courage to delegate and not hover over your person or employee like a helicopter parent and micromanage and take stuff back from them, to entrust them to get the job done. Sometimes it's trusting yourself. Certainly when you take your giant leap that first time, you're really placing all the chips on a belief that you believe in yourself. And that takes a lot of trust in yourself. So trust courage is the courage of vulnerability, which is different than trying something you've never done before. Now, the third bucket of courage is what we call tell courage. It's the courage of voice or assertiveness. It's the courage of the truth teller. It's the courage of not biting your tongue to go along and get along, but to expressing your own belief out loud in front of people, knowing that it's going to be open up to scrutiny. So it's the courage of honesty. And so those three buckets of courage, try, trust, and tell, all of them involve courage. There is even some overlap and reinforcement between those buckets, but they're all unique. So not all courage is the same. So we have a profile, back to your KPI question, where a person can measure how much courage they have in each one of those buckets and which bucket might be in need of more courage.
Somehow I knew if I just asked the question, you would have an answer like that. It just made sense. No, I know that in the time that we've spent together, I'm like, oh man, I can keep going all day. But I know that there's a number of people who have listened this far. They want to find out more about, what you've got going on, or even, pick up a copy of the book because, hey, it is the 10th anniversary edition and all. Yes. What's going to be the best way for them to track you down and figure that stuff out?
Well, they can always find me at billtreasurer.com, and treasurer like the treasurer of a bank. So billtreasurer.com is an easy place to find me. To find the courage material, it's very memorable, is couragebuilding.com. So just like the word team building, but couragebuilding.com. To find my company, Giant Leap. So we've talked a lot about Giant Leaps. GiantLeapConsulting.com is where they find the business. And the book, Courage Goes to Work, where do you think they can find that?
I'm going to go with Amazon, but I'm guessing.
That's true. That's true. That's an easy place to find it. And then just, sort of put in the search field, Courage Goes to Work. But we also have a microsite set up, couragegoes-to-work.com, if they wanted to read more about it there.
Absolutely. Now, as we wind down, I'm interested I have a final question for you, and I'm interested to hear the answer. And I'm hoping it's different than something you've already said, but we'll find out. So let's go on this journey together, because here's what I know. I know that there's someone listening right now who, in the time that you and I have been talking, as I said at the beginning, they've reached what I like to call the precipice of decision. They were stuck somewhere. They were thinking, you know what, I am going to start my business. Or they're like, I'm done with 6. It's time for 7 figures. I'm done with 7. It's time for 8. Yeah, I will hire that person. I'm going to do the next thing, whatever that next thing be. And for most of them, it's get started. Now, like I know, when you reach that precipice, oftentimes we have a companion, and that companion comes in the form of a voice, and it's a voice that reminds us of, well, it didn't work last time, and why do you think it's going to work this time? And really, you're going to have a company? No one's going to listen to you or buy your stuff. And for some people, they're related to that voice. So my question to you is as follows. Let's pretend that this time it's going to be different. This time they're going to follow through, and they're going to do exactly what you say. And they're going to do so in the next 24 to 48 hours. What would you suggest that they do?
I would suggest that they first answer the holy question. A Catholic priest one time told me that these are the four most important words you'll ever learn in the English language. What do you want? What do you want? At a deep level. A lot of people can tell you what they don't want or what they've got that they don't like. Right. But, and then this is a question that is not up for others to decide. What do you want with your life, and where do you want it to go? So sit with that question. Another good question to ask yourself is, where are you playing it too safe? And it might be a question that you're the only one who knows the answer to it. But, even if you didn't want to tell other people, tell yourself, where are you playing it too safe? Now, once you know what you want, and sometimes identifying where you're playing it too safe shows you where your next risk needs to be. But certainly when you say, here's what I want to get to, now you know your destination. So now you know where you need to point. Said the courage goes to work. You're wanting to work towards that want that you've got. Now you have to identify the little leaps that will take you to get to the giant leap. No high diver jumps from 100 foot one time without doing hundreds of jumps from 1 foot, right? So you've got to do the incrementalism. You don't have to take the giant leap all at once. When I decided to start Giant Leap Consulting, I didn't just leave Accenture that one day, right? It was a months-long process. I went to Emory University and took 4 classes. I spoke to different entrepreneurs who had started businesses, some of which failed. I saved a nest egg of 8 months worth of income. I read some books, right? Like all of that was lowering my high dive. I still needed to take the high dive at some point, but that's thoughtful, calculated. I was shifting the weight of my life from one world into another, but not all at once. So for the person who's on this precipice, I would say, ask yourself, what do you want? Where are you playing it too safe? And then start figuring out, now you know what your longer path is, but what are the small little dives that you can take, the little leaps that will help you lead up to the big leap? And I call them lead ups.
I like it 100%. I mean, there's so much that you've shared that I think every entrepreneur needs to hear. Hopefully those of you that are listening, you heard it. But sir, one of the things I just want to say is I just want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to share your knowledge, your wisdom, and your insight here with us today at the Cashflow Diary.
Hey, I got to tell you, this was one of the funnest podcasts I've done in a long time. I really enjoyed talking to you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? That means get over to couragegoestowork.com. Why? Because more courage isn't going to hurt you. And you also heard some very important things, because those of you listening, you and I both know that we don't want to live that life of dangerous safety. And most importantly, it's time for all of us to begin to up-level those questions that we have been asking ourselves. So let me be the first to ask you, what have you failed at this week? Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.